Hello and welcome back to the channel. How's everyone doing? Enjoying new cards, new sets, new Planeswalkers? How about that? Me, this past week, I was playing the heck out of this game because I've been sick for the past week, so I had nothing better to do except play the heck out of all of my decks here. And your loss is my gain because I play with raw Crackling Wit a lot. So I have plenty of observations to make, and I'm hoping to remember all of them that I observed so that I can share them with you here today. Now, raw Crackling Wit is the third raw in the game. They're giving us a lot of them. It was interesting that Webcore chose to make PM2 raw, even though they had to know that raw Crackling Wit was on the horizon here. But anyway, how good is this new raw? Well, let's take a look at his stats here. He's got 113 life, best life total of any raw for sure. Mana bonuses are pretty flat. No bonuses except on his on-color bonuses. So, and even those only gain you a net of 7 mana on a blue match and 7 mana on a red match. For me, that's just too average. I find that when you're trying to keep up with a Planeswalker that has better mana bonuses than you can easily fall far behind. So I would rather have more mana bonuses on my on-color matches because I can easily build for that. I even prefer that stair-stepping type of mana bonus to this because at least with Sunken Citadel or something else that raises your positive mana bonuses, you can get more mana out of any color match that you make. So if you're playing with spree cards, for example, sometimes you will take certain matches that cause cascades or have the potential to over an on-color match in order to trigger a stronger effect. So I think having flat mana spreads across the board and then having mediocre mana bonuses on your on-color match is one of the worst ways to spread out mana bonuses, in my opinion. Let's talk about deck limits. 6 creatures, 7 spells, 6 supports. 7 spells is fine. I didn't find myself really needing more than 7, and I like that you get 6 supports. So he's a little bit versatile in deck design in that way, and he's not really a Planeswalker that does a lot to facilitate looping, which is where you would probably want to load up more on spells for the sake of having less supports. But we'll talk about that in a bit here. So having less spell capabilities than the other 2 Rawls didn't bother me that much. What bothered me more are his abilities, which let's get into now. Prestidigitation Pause. Ability 1, 7 loyalty. Destroy a block of 3/3 gems, pick 2 of the first 4 spell cards from your library, and create a copy of those cards in your hand. You get no mana into those cards, which is a bummer. I mean, I like that you're able to pick 2 of the first 4 spells that you want. I think that's cool. But I don't think it would have hurt to give them, 3 or 4 mana into those cards. Destroying a block of 3/3 gems. This happens first before you pick those spells. And I think it would have been perfectly okay and just a better design overall if the block destruction happened afterwards, because then you could maybe get some mana into those cards by cascading and creating gem matches in that way. I don't think there would have been some weird, oh, this ability is too overpowered, so we have to design it this way. I just think that was just a design oversight. 3/3 gems is a decent amount of gems to destroy. It's 9 gems that you're going to be wiping away. So you can do some things with that. And my decks take full advantage of this. But yeah, just an okay ability. It was the one that I ended up building the most around. And yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to deck building. Lightning Chasers, ability 2, 8 loyalty. Create 7 Is-It Otter tokens, then the first spell card in your hand gains 6 mana. Another just okay ability. let's talk about what the is at otter tokens do, and then I'll talk about why it's just okay. So the is at otters are token creatures. They are 0/1, so they don't have any power on their own, but the prowess deal X damage to the first opposing creature and to your opponent's planeswalker. X is the number of otter cards you control, including their reinforcements, up to 15. This effect can trigger once per turn. We're going to hear once per turn a lot with this planeswalker, and in my opinion, there probably should be a cap on these effects, because with no cap, you can easily abuse it and maybe he's a little bit too overpowered. But once per turn is way too oppressive of a cap, and I think it ruins a lot of fun that potentially can be had. I don't think that this is game breaking if it can trigger 3 times per turn, for example. It would be a pretty solid ability, and since this otter really doesn't have much strength on its own because it can't attack, it has 0 power, it's not going to be doing anything unless you cast a bunch of non-creature cards, which is what prowess is. Also, maybe just because I don't have enough otters or the best otters in the set yet, but I didn't find myself really wanting to build with any extra otters compared to the one that you get from using this second ability. So it's pretty much based on how many otters I create with this ability is going to determine how much damage I can do with this effect here. So it's capped at 15 anyway. So either make the cap less oppressive or take the damage cap off is my suggestion for how I would redesign this ability. And then let's go back here. So your first spell card in your hand gains 6 mana. That definitely helps, but it's still kind of a weak ability in that regard. At least it's only 8 loyalty, so it's pretty cheap in that way. So there is something to be said there. But creating 7 is it otter tokens means that you're going to be dealing 7 damage when you cast a spell or support to your opponent's creature and to their planeswalker. So pretty middle of the road ability if you ask me. Storm Apprentice, ability 3, 14 loyalty, create 4 Storm Otter tokens. And what are those? So a Storm Otter is a support. It has 3 shields. So basically this support at full strength is a 12 shield support. Prowess, create a copy of the first spell card in your library, then copy cards in your hand gain full mana. This can trigger only once per turn. At the beginning of your turn, if you control another otter, deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker. X is the support shield. So this is a very similar ability, I think, to Jaya Ballard, Jaya 1, where you're creating copies of cards, gaining them full mana, the spells, with Jaya's case, but I think this triggers for any creature that's a copy. The problem with this ability I found is that there aren't a lot of cards or ways to create copies of cards in your hand that aren't already full mana. There are a lot of cards that give you full mana copies of cards, actually, but if that's the case, then this part of the ability is unnecessary. So in order to really take advantage of this ability outside of just using his other 2 abilities, you're going to have to go through and find some kind of subpar cards to get a lot out of this ability, at least that part of it. At the beginning of your turn, if you control another otter, deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker. X is the support shield. So this part of the ability, if you have the second ability tokens on the board, then that is one way to take advantage of it. But beyond that, like I said before, I don't have enough really good otters, or maybe they just don't exist, that I would really want to play with to up this support's damage. So I'm not really relying on this ability for creating a lot of damage, nor am I using it a lot to put mana into my spells either. So it's just not really doing much for me. And I tried to build for it, and it just was pretty underwhelming. Even though it's a cheap ability, it doesn't really matter if it's not an ability you want to use all that much anyway. So to me, I felt like this ability really felt short and was disappointing. It just doesn't really do enough for me to justify either building for it, or even if I don't build for it, it doesn't do a lot for you if you just want to use it in normal play. It doesn't enhance what I do enough. So I ended up using the first and second ability a lot more when I was testing this guy out. So for me, it was pretty much a design dud. Let's talk about the pros and cons of this Planeswalker. We got an Is It color combo. Red and blue is definitely a favorite for a lot of people. Right now, red is in a fantastic spot in a way that it hasn't been in a long time. Blue is always going to be blue, so you're always going to have something awesome to do with this color combo. Fairly costed abilities. For them being fairly mediocre, at least they don't make you pay a lot to use them. It's got a better life total than the other roles. And, even though they're not great abilities, there's still decent synergy between all of them. We're not talking like Gauze level synergy, but more little otter-sized synergy. So, there we go. And then the cons. Fairly unimpressive mana gain spread. 7 spell slots. Not a huge con for me personally, but for some people it might be. And yeah, the abilities just feel to me like wasted potential. They never really come together as strong as you feel they should. That's my observation so far. So, with all that said, I did create some decks that I think are pretty fun to use. So, let's get into those now.
Okay, so this first deck was created to take advantage of activated gems on the board here. So there are a handful of cards that create a lot of activated gems or simple tokens that you want to destroy. So when we use his first ability, we can pop a lot of those activated gems without even having to make a gem swap first. So of course, Pyromancer's Goggles is going to be in here, and activate 3, fetch the next spell from your library to your hand. The last spell you control in your hand is free. So there are 4 spells in this deck, and hitting any of those will probably help us a lot no matter where we are in the game. Demolition Field, yes, I know it's a masterpiece, but it is such a good card, and I think that everybody should be chasing after this card. You'll get a ton of great cards on your chase there. So save up those orbs, craft a bunch of mythics from OTJ, and then spend your jewels on chasing this card. I think it's probably the number 1 card from Outlaws at Thunder Junction, so it's well worth your time to do so. So activate 2 of each color, gain 4 mana, then destroy a random opposing support. This can affect vanguards. There are hardly any decks that I don't use this card in right now. And so it creates basically 10 activated gems. And if you hit his third ability, you're going to pop at least one of them, pretty much guaranteed. So you're going to be gaining some mana, and just as important, you're going to be destroying your opponent's supports. And it's only 12 mana too. Fantastic card. Boombox. Boombox is actually a pretty neat card. Not one I was using a lot before, but with a Planeswalker like this, I think it's a very useful card. Plus, it's a 14 mana, 4 shields, artifact. Having 4 shields is pretty relevant because if you're going to be destroying gems, you might hit this support. So you're going to want it to stay on the board as long as you can. At the beginning of your turn, your first creature gets +2 until end of turn. We don't care that much about it. But the activate 2 is where it's cool. Destroy a random opposing cards. It can affect Vanguard support. So pretty solid card here. It's kind of a poor man's Demolition Field, but it can affect creatures. And in my testing, this is really nice to have because you might kill a Rakdos with it. You might kill a Vindicator, something like that. That's kind of nasty that you don't want to deal with through normal means. It might really screw up your ability to get by in your match. So, very nice removal card. And it's a support. The fact that it's a support is relevant because you're going to want to fetch the spells that you need, and having less spells in your deck means that you'll be able to fetch it easier. Chaos Warp is a brand new spell from Bloomburrow. Pick up to one of the first 4 cards from your opponent's library, fetch that card, then if that card is a support, destroy all opposing support cards. Otherwise, destroy all opposing creature cards. So basically, you get a chance to decide, okay, do I want to take out their creatures or do I want to take out their supports? So if you have Demolition Field, then you're likely going to be using this card to take out their creatures, and it's a fantastic way to do so. I love its versatility. It is a masterpiece again, but it's one of the chase masterpieces in a set that doesn't have a lot of them. So I encourage you to try and save some resources for this card. It's awesome for mono red, and yeah, I like to use it in a handful of other decks too. Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest. This is a card that I think if you're going to pick up Raw, you really want this card. I don't even know if I would like Raw at all if I didn't have this card. I happened to get lucky and pull it on the first day, but it is fantastic and is quickly making its presence really well known in today's meta. It is a 15 mana 5/5 bird dragon. When this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, exile the top 3 cards from your library, then deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker and destroy 10 random gems. X is the number of cards in your exile. At the end of the turn, return a random card, should say your turn. Return a random card from your exile to your hand. That card gains full mana. So what doesn't this card do? We're fueling the exile, which is going to make the second part of this card more and more lethal as time goes on. You're destroying 10 random gems, which means you're probably going to be hitting a lot of those activate gems that you created or gold tokens and whatnot at the end of your turn. And then you're getting a free card, full mana, at the end of your turn. So as time goes on, this card keeps getting better and better. All this works right when you play it because it's an ETB effect as well as every time it attacks. So very awesome card. Definitely one of the best cards in the set so far, if not the best. So I hope you pull this card if you don't have it yet. Another really good red spell from this set, Season of the Bold. This and Dragonhawk work very well together. Spree 1, exile the first 5 cards from your library, then draw a card. So even if you're only able to hit Spree 1 when you cast this card, at least it's going to be making Dragonhawk that much more lethal. But Spree 2 is really where it's at. Deal X damage to the first opposing creature and to your opponent's planeswalker. X is the number of cards in your exile. Now, for some reason, it doesn't always deal damage to the first opposing creature. It's got to be a bug, but I'm not exactly sure yet what makes it trigger and what makes it not. But it's a very good card regardless, even if it only would have hit the opponent's planeswalker. But a lot of times you want it to deal damage to the first opposing creature because you're going to want to take it out. And Spree 3, create 4 gold tokens. So that's another thing for the first ability in Dragonhawk to hit. Steamcore Scholar. You know why I like this card at this point, right? It's mostly in here for the loyalty gain because you're going to want to be spamming his first ability. So the longer you can keep this creature on the board, the more loyalty you get every turn. So after a few turns, you're basically able to spam the first ability as many times as you can. So very good card in this deck. Archmage's Newt is not a card a lot of people are using. I never see it out in the field. It took me a while to decide on this card, but It's a very good card in this deck because it's giving you, depending on what you have on your side, right? It's giving you either two of the last cards in your hand with full mana. You're exiling a spell from your library and creating a copy of it in your hand. So we're fueling Dragonhawk and Season of the Bold at the same time. And you're probably going to end up making one of those free. But even if you don't have another creature to saddle, the last two cards in your hand gain half their mana rounded down. So you're getting a lot of mana in your hand, regardless of if you have another creature in your side or not. So definitely give this card a shot if you haven't yet, because it's pretty good. And then finally hit the mother load. Two cards of your choice, half their mana, and we're creating a bunch of gold tokens to get mana from when we hit its first ability or when Dragonhawk does its thing. So a lot of good synergy in this deck. It can take some time to get set up, but I think that's just the nature of using this Planeswalker. His abilities don't do a ton for you in that regard, but when things get going, it's a pretty potent deck. All right, let's go on to the next one. When I was trying to come up with an idea for another deck, I thought, what happens if we only focus on one spell? So when we use his first ability, we're always fetching the same spell. And I thought Season of the Bold is a really good card for this. I talked about it in the last deck run through, but we'll talk about it again. So if you're constantly fetching two copies of the spell, then theoretically, we're just going to be pumping up our exile, really making this card more and more lethal as you go, provided that you're able to hit that spree too fairly reliably. And yeah, there are a few ways to make that a little bit more likely, and we'll get into those in a bit. But yeah, the more you cast this card, the stronger and stronger it gets. And that is important in this deck because it can win very fast. Loot, the key to everything. This card is awesome. I don't know how many people are using it a lot. It is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece for a reason. It's 14 mana for a 1/2, which seems pretty weak, but we're not relying on our creatures to do the damage in this deck anyway, so it hardly matters that it doesn't do a lot of damage. When this card enters the battlefield, this creature gains shield counter 3, then exile the top 10 cards of your library. I love the shield counter 3 on this guy because that means it's going to stay alive for a while. Even Rakdos, it'll take 3 turns for Rakdos to get it off the board. So that is really crucial when you're trying to build up your side of the board. You don't have the removal you want yet, and Rakdos is just demolishing everything on your side, and you can't really get a good footing. So loot will help with that. You'll get 3 turns to do what you need to do while this card is basically fetching random cards from your exile to your hand and giving them full mana. So you're getting basically free cards every turn with loot as long as it stays on the board. So that shield counter is very important here. But it's mostly here because it's exiling so many cards from your library, so that's fueling Season of the Bold, but we are getting free cards with them too. Dragonhawk. Like I said, if you're not using Dragonhawk, I just don't think you're going to be getting a lot out of this raw. So right now, with all the things that left standard, things like cut your losses especially, you want something in your deck that's going to get you mana in some way, destroying gems, creating cascades, and getting free cards a turn. So Dragonhawk is really important here. And we're playing with some activate gem cards too, so that's going to help with that as well. Crocs and Kunaros. Just a solid creature anyway, independent of what it does in this deck. But I thought it was pretty good because When this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, destroy the top 2 cards of your library. If there are 6 or more cards in your graveyard, pick one of the first 4 creature cards from your graveyard and return it to the battlefield under your control. So if you end up losing one of your other creatures, this will bring it back. But then you get the extra bonus of exiling the first 5 cards from your graveyard. So that's going to be fueling Season of the Bolt. So that's why that's there. Demolition Field, we talked about it. Sugarcoat, pretty awesome little card. Brand new support card, Enchantment Aura, for those of you who that matters for. It's only got 1 shield, which doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We're mostly using it for its enter the battlefield effect, and it's got the added bonus of it being flash. So when this support enters the battlefield or board, exile target creature. You can target your own creature if you want to, though with Sleep with the Fish is gone from standard, you might not have to use it very often on your own creature. But if you're playing against someone playing, stun counter cards, you may want to target your own creature. But this is mainly here to get rid of, Rakdos, Phyrexian Vindicator, anything like that. So the rest of this card is pretty inconsequential. At the beginning of your turn, create a food token. Then your opponent creates a food token. Not much of an advantage for you, but also not much of a disadvantage either. But very cool card. It's mostly in here because it is a support, so we're not having to put extra spells in here to remove creatures and stuff. Boombox, again, more removal in the form of a support, which is also good. Leyline of the Guild Pact. Also a great card, both on the board or if you do the overflow. Destroy all gems of your opponent's Planeswalker's colors. So we're going to be hopefully hitting some activated gems with that, or creating cascades that will do the same. Then, of course, if you get one on the board, converting 6 gems to your Planeswalker's color is going to help get things going too. And then Pyromancer's Goggles. There's a good reason that's in here, because we're just going to be able to fetch that Season of the Bolt every time we hit it. And if we're going to be spamming its first ability, it's likely that we'll either make that happen right then and there, or we're going to set up some gem matches that will make this happen easier. And our final card, Sandstorm Verge. It is a land desert. 14 mana, 3 shields. It's a little on the pricey side, but what I like about it is at the beginning of your turn, convert 4 gems to the most present color on the board. So again, we're going to be hopefully creating cascades, or we're going to be setting up some gem matches for us in that way. And then it's also got the added bonus of Activate 2. Your opponent's first creature can't block and can't attack until the beginning of your next turn. So we're basically stunning them for a turn in case we need to. So that has helped a few times here and there, but I'm mostly using it for the gem conversion in this deck. But I like that it has that Activate, so get a little bit of double duty happening in there. I mean, if you have better cards than this, feel free to use them. If you have something like Desolate Mire, for example, a much better choice here, but not everybody's going to have all the masterpieces. So I thought that I would share this with you guys. So I would encourage you to find some budget options for the cards that you might be missing in these decks. So I understand I use a lot of masterpieces in my reviews here, but let's be real. If you have the cards, you would use them too. This deck has 3 uncommons in it, and a rare, and an Origins mythic. So I don't think it's that far out of the possibility of being able to build. But anyhow, if you understand the basics of what I'm going for in these decks, then you can find decent replacements for them. I like to showcase the potential on the high end of a Planeswalker, because I think that's everyone's ultimate goal, is to make the best decks they possibly can. So if I can make the best deck I possibly can maybe that will inspire people to look at what they have and build reasonable facsimiles for them. So there's a little bit of my thinking behind showcasing these decks with heavy mythic and masterpiece builds. I have a Dihada deck that's pretty much all mythics and masterpieces, and that's going to be out of the realm of most people's ability to build. So I'm taking it a little bit easy here. All right, so those are the decks, and let's talk grades now.
Here we are. Everyone's favorite part of the video, the grades, the cold hard facts. Well, not really, they're just opinions, but they are correct opinions. All right, so first off, max hit points, pretty straightforward. 113 gives you a B. Pretty good, nothing amazing, but definitely not something that's going to really bother you at the end of the day. Mana spread, pretty average, not exciting to me, though not terribly offensive. So, good old C, right in the middle of the road. Ability 1, there are things obviously that are good about it, but definitely leaves a lot of room for improvement. So I'm giving it a B. I think it's the best ability he has, just because of its simplicity. Still wish that it would give you some mana when you use it, but it's still okay. Second ability, those otters can do a decent amount of damage for you. Nothing game breaking. Wish it could give you a little bit more mana into the spell in your hand, but what are you going to do? So that is a B minus for me. I find myself using it sometimes in a pinch if I just need that spell in my hand to be given enough mana to either cast right then and there, or after I make a gem match, fills up the rest of the mana needed to cast that spell. Casting something like a Chaos Warp to really get yourself back on even footing with your opponent very much helps with that. Ability 3, talked about all the reasons that I don't like this ability that much. It's not the worst ability I've ever seen, but it's definitely pretty underwhelming, and I feel like it was a lot of wasted potential, so I give it a C. Versatility, I tried a lot of different cards with this Planeswalker, and I don't know, there aren't enough cards that take advantage of his abilities, and with his mana spread being the way it is, you can't necessarily put a bunch of overpowered cards in it and just win that way. I mean, you could, because that's just how the game is, really, at the end of the day. But other Planeswalkers with better mana gains, such as Dak Faden, will do it better for you anyway. So his versatility, I give a C. Card utility, he's not really doing much to improve the cards that you put in your deck. You know, maybe with the first ability being able to pop a lot of activated gems, I would say right there is a way that he helps you utilize your cards a bit better. But that's really all he's got going for him in that department. So that's also going to get a C for me. And then fun. So I did have fun while playing the decks that I was using, but I would say that was more because the cards I was using were fun. It's fun to, you know, destroy a bunch of activated gems with his first ability. Beyond that, he was pretty average when it came to trying to utilize everything else in his kit. So I can't say he was boring to use, but I feel like you could run these decks with much better planeswalkers and probably have more fun with them, even if you don't have a way to pop a bunch of activated gems. So for me, the fun factor came in at a B minus. So overall, what was his final grade for me? He gets a C. Not the worst Planeswalker, but pretty disappointing overall. I think that as far as web core Planeswalkers go, there is a lot of synergy happening in his abilities, though all of that doesn't really amount to a lot of power at the end of the day. Though, as more sets come into standard, maybe you'll find some things that you like about him. There are a lot of cards that copy spells and stuff in Legacy, so maybe this is more of a better Legacy Planeswalker that you might use in weekly events. Maybe that's where I will slot him into in my collection here. But when it comes to what we have in standard right now, I think Dak Faden is a much better planeswalker. I even think Roll 2 is a better planeswalker than this guy. And I don't think that Roll 2 is that amazing either. Roll 1 continues to be king and will continue to be so in for the life of this game. At least that's how I feel. So, there you have it. There's my review. I would like to know, were you guys expecting and predicting me to be fairly low on this Planeswalker, or was there anything that surprising about this review for you? And yeah, if there's anything that you feel like I missed, I am also very much willing to hear that out because that might affect my enjoyment of him as well. So if you are also looking forward to using him because there is something that I missed here, that would be great to hear. As always, thank you so much, Webcore, for letting me try out this Planeswalker. Even when they aren't my favorite Planeswalker, it's always great to be on the forefront of the community when it comes to trying out these new walkers and getting first crack at them. So, looking forward to the next Planeswalkers we get. And yeah, I'm also looking forward to seeing what kind of Vanguards we get from this set. Soon enough, now that my voice is back, I will be doing live streams showcasing some of the great new cards and synergies that we got in this set. There aren't that many, but the ones that are good are really good. So turn on your notifications to let you know when I go live so that you can watch them in real time and give me feedback as I go. Or, you can always watch them after the fact, after they're done being recorded. So, see you there. Have fun. And I hope you find all the most broken combos you can. See you later.